Hello. This is Arian, aka Absolutely Arian, and we are back tonight again with the Lifeboat Live. And I am excited about the topic that we have tonight. So as you join, please let me know who is watching, where you're watching from. And if you are now catching this on the replay, well, welcome. And I'll get to your comments later. So as we are about to start this, I just want to let you know that viewers' discretion is advised. This conversation may not be for little children. So if you have little children in the vicinity, you might want to, get some headphones in for this conversation. This is grown folk talk. So we are talking about a topic that seems to be very taboo, especially within the Christian community, within the church, and that is sex. Why is it a bad word? Why is it taboo? And why is it something that we do not talk about openly and educate ourselves on openly within the church? So, without further ado, I have a special guest who is a professional sexologist, sex therapist, social worker, and she is also known as the intimacy coach. I've heard her speak on this topic from, a Christian point of view, and she is phenomenal. So without further ado, I want to bring to the stage none other than Brittany. Hi.
Hey
girl, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much for being on here. I am sweating a little bit already because I know it's going to be juicy. And I'm excited to get it. I'm just going to go ahead and make this public because I don't know why my Facebook doesn't allow it to go public right away so people can share. Let me see, edit privacy. There we go. And so now you guys can share it and now I'll be able to see your comments. So as Pastor Holton says, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord, Pastor. We are about to get into it. So Brittany, why don't you introduce yourself for those who don't know you, so we can get to know a little bit about your background and how you got into this field.
Oh, sure. So as Arian said, I am Brittany Broaddus-Smith. I am the founder of the Intimacy Firm. The Intimacy Firm is a faith-based sexuality education and intimacy coaching agency. We are based here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but I travel all over and I have clients internationally, really helping. In a nutshell, our mission is to empower individuals to discover, navigate, and embrace their sexual selves in a way that doesn't compromise their values. In the streets, I like to say that I am the self-appointed representative of all those unapologetically in love with Jesus and sex.
Yeah.
Those who understand that sex is the gift that God gave us. So when we say that the world has perverted it, we're recognizing that it was ours to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so now we're just trying to reconcile what was rightfully ours to begin with as a form of honor, when we honor ourselves in our bodies and things like that, whether we're abstaining, whether we are married, whatever the case as it relates to sexuality, just pushing against the idea that sex somehow is dirty and that sex is this necessary evil that is bad, but God just happens in his sin, but God just happens to turn his back on it when we're married. Mm-hmm. So, that's what the work that I do. As my background is in psychology. As you said, I'm also a licensed social worker. Mm-hmm. So there's not just something that I like to do. There's a science to this. I've been doing this for a very long time. Mm-hmm. I've worked before I started the Intimacy Firm. I was a child welfare social worker. So I've been working in the family system for over 10 years, over a decade, and I really see the impact that a lack of sex education has on families, on the way we engage with one another, and really shapes the way we even view God. Is our relationship with sex impacts how we view view Christ.
Right,
so
right.
the work that I do is really rooted in my three strategies: is education, empowerment, and values honoring exploration. So.
Okay. When you said that you've been doing this for 10 years, I was like, 10 years? You don't even look like you're old enough to be working for 10 years. You look so young.
Yeah, I've been around for a little bit now.
Okay, okay. You got some experience behind it.
A little bit.
Yeah. So Brittany, like, so what made you veer into the, like, especially as a Christian and being in the church, and I know how what you just said about, like, kind of sex being viewed as dirty. Like, what made you want to kind of focus in on being a sexologist?
You know what? It's one of those things that I say that I didn't choose sex. Sex chose me. When more like God said, "This is what you're going to do." Up until my first day of college, I wanted to be a lawyer. Like,
a lawyer.
I wanted to be Johnny Cochran until I got to college. My pre-law courses were like deathly boring. Like, I can't do this. So I changed to psychology, and I always enjoyed the, humans and our minds and the way we think and engage with one another. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I can do this. And then I realized how much schooling you need to be a psychologist. And ironically, I'm getting my PhD anyway, so I probably could have just stayed in that lane because I was trying to avoid it by going to social work.
Right.
But then when I got there, I recognized I really did want to do couples work. Just like couples, like marriage and family therapy in that regard. But right. I got married at 22 years old to someone 10 years older than me. And then he was a deacon, and like really seeing, and we went to a very transparent church. Mm-hmm. And so we shared a lot. And I saw, though, when we like peeled back the layers of like, if a couple was going through something they were sharing, if we really peeled back the layers, there were a lot of like unmet, unexpressed, unaddressed sexual concerns. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't understand why it was like that amongst like a church like mine that was so transparent. We were still having these issues with sex. And I recognize, because like the God that I know, the God that I serve, the things that I see in the Bible don't match these mindsets and these ideologies and these hangups as it relates to sex. And so I began to study more about like just the science of sex and just like basic sex ed and learning things. And then those are the kind of conversations when I taught Bible study, when I taught, Sunday school, just like basic sex ed is what I was teaching. I wasn't even really trying to upend anything. And like teaching 50, 60-year-olds like where their clitoris was like life changing. And I was like, okay, God, I see what you're doing. I am not, some folks that are believers are less likely, we don't need like diagnosis. Like some of us have the diagnosis, right? But in this area, I'm not really diagnosing anything. I'm really just doing basic psycho ed, basic education, basic like unlearning of like generational myths and things like that. And when I saw that, and I saw like the literal, it was like literally saving marriages. It was just like, I don't really speak like, oh, well, God told me this, God said that, or I heard the Lord say. That's not really like my natural vernacular. But with this, it was nothing that I could do, nowhere I could go without coming back to and God saying, I said this. I mean, my personality, I have just like a natural fearlessness I could be a little shy, as you can tell. And so it just was like one of those things where it was just like, if anybody was going to do this, it's going to be me. So.
Well, and listen, and that's what I love about God and the church and the gifts that he gives everyone, is that everyone has their own lane. Even if there's many people doing one thing, it's always unique to your personality. Absolutely. And how, like you don't ever have to copy anyone. You don't have to be, take this person's style. Like God gives you a gift according to who you are and what he's placed in you and your personality. Absolutely. And it's being you that's always going to be a blessing. So I love that you do what you do, and it definitely takes a certain level of fearlessness to do this, because sex is like something that people kind of shy away from because it makes you blush. Yep. Talk about it, you know what I mean? Because of the societal, norms and like the taboo, especially within the church, how taboo it can be to talk about it, right? So for those who are now just joining, I just want to let you know that we are talking with Miss Brittany. She is a sexologist, and we are talking about the word that everyone is scared to say, sex. Sex, S-E-X. We are talking about it because I have found, so I didn't grow up in a Pentecostal church coming up as a child. You know, it's something that I came into much later, or, you know, in my late teens. And so I didn't grow up with the hangups necessarily about sex within the church, but, you know, just maybe culturally, like you didn't really talk to your parents about it. You know what I mean? I didn't get the talk. I never got the talk from my my mother or anything. Like, it was really just like when I started, you know, to transition into my womanhood, you know, when I started my period and my cycle, it was just kind of like, well, you gotta be careful because you shouldn't date any boys because you can get pregnant now, and don't bring any babies back to my house. You better go to school, get your education. And that was basically the gist of my talk. What I learned about sex and like sexually transmitted diseases and how everything works down there was literally in school in my 8th grade sex ed class, right? And then what you hear about sex from your peers in school, because I mean, I was so green, you know, I didn't know anything. It was only like things that I would hear people at school say. Like, I heard someone talking about oral, and I was like a presentation. I had no idea what that was until I came home and I asked my mother, what is that? And she was just like, who did you hear say that? And she was like, listen, they don't know what they're talking about. And that was it. That's when I realized that much. And because of how she reacted, I kind of realized, ooh, this must be something taboo. You know what I mean? And so with all that to say, like, do you think it's important as, you know, within the church to have conversations with young people, single people about sex, so that it's not this dirty little thing because listen, the young people become, you know, eventually they have hormones, they have feelings that they don't want to talk about, that they feel dirty about, because sex has been this, like, you know, a sin as far as they're concerned, as long as you're not married. And you know, obviously God has made sex to be between a man and his wife, you know what I mean, legally. But people are having sex. Yeah. Whether we want to admit it or not. You know, because guess what? We only find out that they are having it when they show up at church 6 months pregnant, and it's like a shame, right? Yeah. And they don't have the education. They don't feel like they can talk to anybody about their urges, about their needs. So what kind of teaching or what kind of programs do you think we need within the church for young people, for single people, when it comes to sex education? And whether it would include abstinence in there, or, you know, and all that stuff.
Yeah. So studies show, because I work, in addition to the work I do at the intimacy firm, I also work for a school district. Right. And so I look at that through this lens too, about educating young people and when is appropriate and things like that. And so I want to say, first thing I want to say is that there is age appropriate sex education across the lifespan. Right. When we are still in the stages of we're doing head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes, vulva, labia, can all go together. Like, you're teaching them words, you're teaching them body parts. That's still sex ed when you're teaching them body parts, right? So there's not this matter of it's not for the right age. It's like certain things are for certain groups, and from there. To the point of whether it needs to be the programs in the church, I would say if there are qualified individuals to have the conversation in the church, there absolutely should be there. Like, at my church, there's no reason for you know, us not to have a program on sex ed if I'm there, right? But every church doesn't have the capacity to teach it, because sexology, sexual education is a science. It's not just something that you can do, right? There's an education that you need to have. So what I would say is less that every church should be required to have this program, but every church should create foster an environment where the questions it's a safe space to have the questions. There's still a lot, although we're in a postmodern society where the power of the pulpit is waning, it is still very strong, especially it's still particularly among Black and brown folks who love Jesus. The pulpit still has a lot of weight. So from the pulpit, if the church leadership are creating environments where they are establishing the conversation of sex as a vital one, then folks will feel comfortable seeking out professionals or information elsewhere, even if it's not necessarily in church. I don't think that is right to require the church to be all thing, to be everything if they're not meeting their needs. When you went to school, when you went to get your DMin, when you went to get your your Mat or MDiv, they didn't have a sex ed course. So why are you teaching on anatomy and physiology and all that?
Right.
Say is what you can do in your messaging, or the churches can foster this culture that pushes back against shame. And shame is a lot of times what keeps people from asking the right questions, right? So that is what I think a church responsibility is just to establish, or that they not sole responsibility, but they can aid in establishing it as important and normalizing the conversation, even if it's not had within that space. So it's a matter of, we're not talking about this here per se, this particular thing as it relates to sex ed, because we don't have the staff or the capacity to really handle it appropriately. However, if the congregants are asking, and we had a Bible study on sexuality or relationships, and they bring somebody like me in to have the conversation, it says to the congregants, like, this is okay, and I see the need, and I'm gonna help you meet the need, even if I can't meet it myself. It's okay to delegate, because the reality there, like you said, we talking about earlier, there are gifts and purposes that fall outside of the walls of the church that still meet the needs inside the church. I'm
traditional ministry.
Right, exactly. And so being a sexologist is not traditional in no way, shape, or form. I even had a church tell me there's no such thing as a Christian sexologist. And I had to go back to, so when the thing is that when God, in Genesis 1:26, when God saw all that he had made, and not only said it was good, said it was very good, when he created man, did anatomy not come with that as well? So if it's not a God thing, if you believe in the creation story, and you believe that we were created in his likeness and in his image, and you believe that he is a sovereign God, you believe he rules on the theology as well as the social science.
Right.
And so I think that is important to your original question, that we just as believers, just create a space, particularly for our young people, where be what I like to call be an askable adult. Letting children know that they can ask any question as it comes through. Because the thing is that when children and young people, and even as adults, when we want information, we're going to find it. Whether it's good information or not is begs to be examined. But like you said, the sex is happening on TV. Sex is happening in the school buildings, on the school bus, everywhere. And just like you heard that word oral, and you went and go talk to your parents, that is happening all around. So if students, and the things that I know that as a child, a lot of the things that I found myself into was out of curiosity, because I had nowhere to go to ask the question. So I went to go figure it out on my own. And I, like you, didn't grow up per se in church. Like, I got saved when I was 14. My mom was dating a deacon. She got saved because he was saved, and then we got saved. And then when they broke up, they stopped going. My mom and my sister stopped going to church, but I still went, because like me and Jesus, we was cool from there. And so at like 14 years old, I was like looking for my own church home and all that. But those like inbred thoughts and ideas about sex that sometimes come from having a church history or experience, I didn't have. But I did have that culture of silence that was around sex. So it was kind of imputed into me that sex was a secret.
Right.
And it wasn't anything to talk about. So it was just one of those things. And so we need to remove that cloak of shame, turn up the volume on that silence, and let that way it'll prevent the enemy from cultivating those seeds of shame. Those seeds of shame that we inadvertently plant just almost like muscle memory. Like we think it's cute to call the vulva a pocketbook or to call the penis a wee wee and things like that. We're just so ingrained in who we are. But what you're saying, when you say finger, leg, head, wee wee, finger, leg, foot, pocketbook, what you're saying is all of those other things are okay to be named, but those parts it has to have a nickname. It's not okay to be named. You that's how you plant the seeds of shame there.
Right.
Even with the and the things that when we call them like private parts. Private in as much as it's not for you to just be splatting across the world. But that's what it means, but how we live it out is it's shameful. Like we're walking around with these body parts, and then we begin to resent our bodies for doing what bodies do, right? We're living in a day and time with hormones and food where young ladies are reaching puberty or starting their menstrual cycle 8, 9, 10 years old, right? And then with that, hormones come, hips are spreading, they developing shapes and stuff like that, and the body is just doing what the body does. And now because I'm assumed to be, that age old thing. If she got hips too young, she must be, or if her hips is spread, she won't be fast. She must be having sex. So my body's just doing whatever it does. Hormones and nerve ending synapses firing like they do. I have no control over it.
Right.
Because of how I'm shaped and how I'm built. Now you're looking at me a certain way. So now I'm covering a certain way. I have to dress. Now, granted, you have to dress your size just in general. That's not like because you do anything, but just in life, you want to look nice. You just dress for your body size, right?
Right.
But what happens though, when I'm mad because of these hips, I'm not mad at my mom because of my hips. I'm not mad at my pastor because of my hips. Who am I mad at because of my hips? Who am I seeding anger with? God. Like, why did you make me like this? And so now, and then that's another conversation for another day. But now the girl with the hips has to hide and be mindful of her body because we don't want to bring no unwarranted attention. But there's no conversation about the ones who shouldn't be looking at this 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old anyway.
Say it, ma'am.
But that's not what we were talking about today. But I hope I answered your question.
Yes. This is fantastic. I'm just sucking it up right now because you are speaking facts. Like, because, even I could even speak for myself. I didn't have like the hips, and I wasn't somebody who developed young, you know what I mean? But when I did develop and I got hips and butt and thighs and all that other stuff, I did feel shamed for it, mostly in the church, because it's like, don't wear this, don't wear that, because you don't want men to, you don't want to tempt the men, you don't want to diss the men. And it's like, well, what do you want? Do you want me to wear A-lined skirts for the rest of my life so that I don't tempt anybody?
Yep.
Because, and I'm conformed, and you're right, we do dress for our size, but at the same time, I can't help that my hips do this, or my butt does this. And I don't think that I should be punished for it, and made to look like a nun for the rest of my life because I have a shape.
And then what happens with that? What happens when we do that, right? We're made to we want to look like we're taught that the right way to be is to look like a nun for the rest of our lives, right?
Right.
Then we go on and we do all the right things and we get chosen, and now we're married. And then the number one complaints that I get from my clients, from husbands, is about that same idea, like the matronly, we don't want to explore, don't want to really enjoy, like don't want to show up for their husbands. And it's the thing is, like, it's not necessarily even their fault, because what they're taught was this is the way to be. This is the way to, like, this is the way to go. And so when you get, so that shame that we teach and that we attach to folks to keep folks, because we're so afraid. And I believe, and this is not an indictment on the church, because I don't do that. Like, I love the church, particularly the Black church. Like, I'm here. It's like one of the greatest places to be. Like, if you are hurt or hungry or want to rejoice, like, there's no celebration like in church. There's no comfort like in church. That, so this is not an indictment on that. But just like God rebukes us because he loves us, this is one of those things that's saying, here's an area where we can do a little bit better, right? And so the thing is that when we are moving along in that way, from seated from the way we even name our body parts and not really showing anything different, then we get into this marriage and it's like, okay, all of those thoughts that kept me all of these 10, 15, 20, however many years to keep my mind off of it. Now I'm supposed to just put that down and now see this thing in this whole new light. I'm like, this thing that you told me was gross. The thing that you told me
stay away from.
Good girls don't do. All of these things that you told me was wrong. Now I'm supposed to just look at it as beautiful and then ready to just give myself over to it. And it's a lot of times those seeds is why a lot of wives in particular, sex is something that happens to them, not something that they are an active participant and decision maker in, because we are taught even from childhood to be, it's like a moment, like don't think about it. Girl, you better get that man some. Be wet, but don't do too much. Be wet and willing, but don't want it too much.
Yeah.
Right? Like be available, but don't desire it. Like there's these mixed messages. And so all of these things a lot of times are going through a woman's head, and then they're in bed and doing this it's called spectatoring, where they're like in the moment, but they're like, it's almost like an out-of-body experience, looking at it, calculating, am I going too much? Am I moaning too loud? Am I moving too loud? If I want to turn over, but if I do, am I allowed to turn over? Do I have to wait for him to turn me over? Like there's a lot of just, and this is not just an experience that for women, because for men, there's this expectation of what a real man is, a real man does. So then if a man is lower desire, then they are not seen as masculine, right? So there's this performative sexuality on both parts, where folks are having to show up like they were told they were supposed to be, and that's really serving as a pleasure pirate, as I like to call it, because when you try to live your life according to the supposed to be, you're keeping yourself away from the true amazing and gift and really the birthright of that pleasure is and was designed to be.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So thank you everyone who's in the room right now. Pastor Morris, Charlene, Kimberlyn, thank you so much for sharing. If you are in the room right now, please do share. Let us know that you're in here. Leave a comment. At the end, we will be taking a few questions. And if you don't want to write your questions on here because you might be shy, please feel free to inbox me the question. I won't reveal your identity, just the question for Brittany so that she can answer you. But you can send your questions now if you like to my inbox if you want them to be anonymous. Okay, so we are talking about sex. We are the main purpose of this conversation is to remove the shame that we tend to feel behind sex. There's a lot of people who can't even say sex without blushing and feeling uncomfortable because it's been made to feel like something dirty and like off limits. And of course, we do know as Christians, that sex has been, saved to be enjoyed in the confines of marriage. But the problem that we seem to face a lot of the times is that we have so much shame around our bodies and sex and being sexual and having sexual desires that by the time we get to the wedding bed and to in a place that we should feel good about it, we're uncomfortable, we're self-conscious, and sex is a huge part of marriage, and we can't perform because we are so much in our minds about what we've been, saving ourselves for and like thinking has been, something that's dirty for so many years. Now, how do we get to the place now when we have to transition from singlehood to marriage that we can now, what this conversation really is about, how can we keep ourselves, right? And not have shame hinder us later on when it is time to perform, right? And so we have Christian sexologist here, Miss Brittany, who is just talking to us very candidly about sex and how to have a healthy mind around it. So, Miss Brittany, you gave us some really, really great points. Now, what would you say then about how would you go then about teaching someone who is trying to keep themselves for marriage? What would you say that their mindset should be around sex, and how should they prepare themselves mentally, physically to go into that space some point when they do say I do with their partner, especially for women, because I feel like the shame rests heavily more on the women of the church, or just women in general, than it does more. I think men have a different kind of pressure. I think women are more pressured to be kept and to be saved and to be sanctified and to be, covered, whereas men are more seen as like there's a little bit more lax on the being kept, but on performing and pleasing their wives and doing all that other stuff. So would you say that we should prepare our minds and our bodies around sex and going into that transitional phase as a single person?
So for me, and then also just another thing I said earlier, studies show that folks who have access to comprehensive sex ed are more likely to delay sexual initiation than those who don't. Right. So if the mission of the church is for abstinence until marriage, it would behoove us as believers to tap into comprehensive sex ed. And the comprehensive sex ed, that is pleasure inclusive. And so there's a way to educate without enticing. Right. And so we have, folks say don't wake love before it's time and all of those things. But the thing that there's a level of discipline that we have to have just in life in general. Like you can have a lot of money, but you still have to have a budget. Right. You can have access to all the food in the world, but you still have to be mindful of what you eat. The same thing with sexuality. You educate yourself. The way I like to say is obtain education, relay information, and then to set the expectations, particularly when, like, for those who are dating or trying to abstain and dating. There are the God of the universe, the Alpha and Omega, beginning, and his story, his meta narrative is contained in the 66. The 66.
Come on, meta narrative. Vocabulary words.
In the 66 books of the Bible, right? But if you think him, he, the Trinity, them, whether you oneness, whether you a Trinitarian, whatever you are, if you think that that's it, that's all there is to be to God in the 66 books, then you don't know him. You don't know him at all. So he gave, as we just were talking about, there's ministry outside of the four walls. So there are people of God, children of God, who have been graced to do other things that don't fit in the ministry context, like write books about sexuality. If you believe him to be a sovereign God, that means he's sovereign over social science too. So if you go to a doctor, if you go to a cardiologist, if you go to a endocrinologist, whatever, if you have certain health issues, then seeking a sex educator, you understand the nuance of who is skilled to do what. So read books about your body. First of all, know your body. Anatomy, sex ed. A lot of us have been done a disservice even in school, where you said you had sex ed in 8th grade. I had it in 8th grade too, but it really was a bunch of STI riddled genitalia. Like, you don't want to do this, and then we carry around that stupid egg as if that could ever deter us from having a baby. Right. And so, all of those things. So it really was poor. It was piss poor. Right. Yeah. And so being because you'll be surprised how many of my clients are 50 plus and don't know their body parts. Like, I use Veronica, that's my buddy. Oh, I don't know if you ever met Veronica.
No, I've never met Veronica.
We've been connected on Clubhouse, so we haven't seen each other. But
right.
This is Veronica. She's my vulva puppet. She's an anatomically correct vulva puppet. She's fully equipped with the clitoral hood, the clitoris, labia, like the whole nine, right? And so she comes to, within the first 1 or 2 sessions of my new clients, she comes because people don't even know their body parts. I've had 50 plus women who've never seen their vulva. I recommend women taking a mirror after every menstrual cycle, or at least once a month, just looking and making sure everybody is where it's supposed to be, and really just being able to identify. She was my new client. She's 56, and she learned of her urethra. I said, you don't pee out of your vagina, right? And she was like, I think I know now. And so at 56 years old. And so when to act like, what do singles need to know? You need to know how your body works. You cannot truly honor God with your body if you don't know how it works. Right. You can't say that you are. We tell folks to abstain from sex, right? But then don't teach them what it is and what they're actually even abstaining from, like what the nuances of it is. I had a colleague of mine who had a client. They were struggling with infertility. It was an arranged marriage, but they really enjoyed each other. So it wasn't like a relational issue. They were struggling with infertility for months, for years, and then come to find out when they tried all of the tests and everybody's levels were good. Come to find out after meeting with my colleague who's a sex therapist, he was trying to penetrate her urethra, not her vagina.
I know you're lying.
So they weren't getting pregnant. She didn't enjoy it. Clearly, I mean, you try to put penis in your urethra. And so it was painful. And so this very thing, and something simple like the knowledge of anatomy could have shifted the trajectory of their first couple of years of marriage. Yeah. And so there is a way, like, I'm not suggesting that we in the candlelight at dinner, like, I want you to kiss me here, and I can't wait to get married because then I'm gonna bounce it like this. Like that's not what we're not saying that. It's like a regular conversation, so that on our wedding night is not the night that you find out that I have some trauma around oral sex, and that's like a hard boundary for me. That's not something that somebody should find out on the wedding night. That should have been a conversation that we had before. And so when we have folks like me and other tons and tons of other sex educators that are out there that you can bring in to your people to really give them an opportunity to ask the questions and say, I don't know, be comfortable with not knowing. And and what it also does is a lot of folks have never had sex, and what they have is FOMO. They got the fear of missing out, and they assume because of what porn told them, because of what their friends told them, because of what Love and Basketball told them it was supposed to feel like and sound like, and we have this whole idea of what sex is supposed to be. Then we get into a marriage, and it doesn't go that way, or the orgasm doesn't come with the screaming and the crying and the and falling off the bed and all that other drama that they do in porn. It doesn't come like that. So then it's almost like if we're doing something wrong. What we're doing, the way we do sex and singleness is setting folks up for success in marriage. And by keeping that silence, that's how we do wrong. So educate yourself. Number one, learn your body. And that doesn't mean masturbation. That means literally like, okay, there's an inner labia and an outer labia, but my inner labia hangs a little bit lower than my outer labia. So you know what I mean? Just like simple stuff like that. Here's my, I typically run a little more acidic, which is why there's light spots in my underwear. So like even stuff like that, like women will ball up their underwear, throw it in the trash, ashamed because the seat of their panties turn white. And I'm like, it's the acidic or alkaline, a little more alkaline, excuse me. To change like just simple things like that, or just like vaginal secretions that are typical, everyday and normal. Being able to know, okay, this is just what my vulva does, and then you'll be able to know the difference. So that what does that lend itself to? If something goes wrong or something changes, when you go to the doctor, you are able to advocate for yourself to say, hey, this is not my baseline. Something is wrong. Right. And so speaking of finding your sexual voice lends itself to so many other areas. Like you can speak up for yourself in sex. You can speak up for yourself in the doctor. You can speak up for yourself at work. You can speak up for yourself in other places. And that's why that autonomy and agency that as we talked about before, that starts with how we teach our children, creates more autonomous adults.
Right.
The ones not afraid of their own shadow, not just like letting life happen to them, being confident in their purpose, in their call, all of those things to be able to, and even being able to say, okay, we can date, and this is men and women alike. We can date, I like you, but I'm not having sex, and I'm okay with it. And so to like being able to knowing yourself helps to be able to establish like, oh, something's in my eye, Jesus. I'm not having sex, and I'm not coming to you downtrodden, feeling away, scared. Like, if I tell you I'm not having sex, you're going to break up with me. Oh, well, if I'm telling you, because the thing is that you don't want to be with nobody who's only abstaining for you. Because I did a clubhouse room not too long ago with some of my girlfriends, like, stop saving yourself for your husband. because the abstinence isn't for him. It's for God.
Right.
It's your heart posture to serve the Lord. And so those are what I would say. Educate yourself, establish what your boundaries are with the folks that you are around, and be clear about what your sexual expectations are. And if you don't know what your sexual expectations are, then develop them once you get there.
Right.
Don't take on other people's expectations as your own.
Okay. So while you are dealing with your eye, I'm gonna go ahead and reset the room. I'll put you backstage for a minute, and I'll let you. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay. I was like, I could put you backstage if you need to go deal with it.
Well, I'm good.
Okay.
It's gonna come out eventually.
Okay. So, for those who are just joining us, we are talking about sex. We are talking about the taking out the element of shame when it comes to the discussion about sex within the Christian community. So that when we do, especially as singles, when we do transition into the period in our lives where we are going into marriage, that we don't have these hiccups and the self-consciousness about sex, and that we're able to even speak about it without being shy, without blushing, because it is a gift from God, and it should not be looked upon as something, a dirty little secret, a dirty thing that we can't talk about, something that's inappropriate. No, it's a gift from God. It's meant for a certain season in our lives when it's between a husband and a wife, right? For the safety of, not only our hearts, but it's also just, it's a form of worship, right? And so we want to have a healthy sex life when we get to that place, and we can't have that unless we have a healthy understanding of it and of ourselves and of our bodies. And so this conversation is really to remove the stigma. This is what we talk about on the Lifeboat. We talk about a lot about mental health and removing the stigma behind mental health when it comes to the church. And we've been going into different topics and stuff like that. So I am not a sexologist, and I couldn't possibly have this conversation without Miss Brittany, because she is an expert. I've heard her on Clubhouse talk about this so many times, and I've just been fascinated with her knowledge, her wisdom, and the fact that she absolutely loves God. And she intertwines, her Christian beliefs and teachings with her career, and it's just beautiful to watch how she does it. So please do follow her, do connect with her, as she is full of information. Thank you, Kimberlyn. Thank you so much. Yes, it is important for us to have these kind of conversations. So with that said, I was saying earlier that what time is it now? Oh yeah, so we're going to be taking some questions. We have about 15 minutes left. We're going to be taking some questions. If you want to write your questions on here, please feel free to do so. I see that we have 2 questions here from Pastor Hopkins Morris, so we're going to get to them right now. And if you feel shy, I know this can be a bit of a taboo, uncomfortable thing for a lot of people. If you do feel shy, feel free to inbox either me or Brittany. I'm going to be watching my inbox. So if you have any questions that you don't want to necessarily broadcast and you want to be anonymous about, send them straight to my DM. I won't reveal your identity. We will just ask your question to Brittany. Okay, so go ahead and send those messages right in. And we're going to start off with Pastor Hope Morris's question. It says, I have 2 questions. Number 1, what do you say, or how can you help Christians who are addicted to porn?
Okay. So here's from the social science aspect, there is a discrepancy as to whether us in the business actually use the word addiction as it relates to porn as well as sex. Because addiction, as we know, as it relates to like drug use or alcoholism, changes our biological makeup in a way that excessive porn watching or excessive sexuality, sex doesn't. So that's the one thing I want to note, that is, it's arguably that porn addiction isn't a matter of something that actually exists as much as the level at which somebody watches porn is increased beyond what the person who's speaking about it like. So I think as a professional, I have to note that. But to the particular question, I would get to the root of the why. If there was a coach and client, I would understand what role this pornography is serving in their lives. It becomes to the point where it's impacting their everyday. They can't go to sleep without it. They can't, if they have to do it before they have to do this, becomes a more of a compulsion or an obsession. It's like a compulsive behavior. Then I want to know what's the why. Like, are we doing, like, what role has it served in the past? What role is it serving now? What void do we feel it will leave if we're not still connected? Like, I won't be able to do what if I don't watch porn? Porn is serving what for me? Porn has, and church spaces, I begin to idolize it because it is meeting what need. Is what I would say. So before I can answer like how I would help them, I would need to get under, because everybody's going to be different. I've had, some folks who started pairing porn with masturbation, and they were introduced to it from a very young age. So it's more of a trauma response. I have folks who do it to pair with masturbation because of that gets them in the mood, and they're using masturbation to keep them during abstinence. They'd rather do this instead of someone else. I have folks who are married, and the sensationalized fantasy that porn is more, draws them in more than the sex life that they are having. And so we kind of peel back the layers as to what void they find is missing in their actual sex life. So it's difficult to give a blanketed answer outside to believers, just in understand, believers and non-believers alike. Porn is not real. Porn, and I know that should be self-explanatory, but I'm going to say it again. Porn is fake. Porn is about as real as Superman. And so what fantasy does is distorts and exaggerates reality by hiding the negative. That's what fantasy is. It's all of the best of the extremes of what everything could possibly be. And so what porn does is sets up unrealistic expectations. And so the more you commit to watching that, and what you're either consciously or subconsciously measuring yourself or your partner up to what is happening in porn, the more continuously dissatisfied you will be. So it will be one of those catch-22 situations, because porn doesn't show sex in real life. It doesn't show the lead up. It doesn't show the premature ejaculation. It doesn't show you falling off the bed. It doesn't show the new position that you tried that it didn't work. Like, it doesn't show pleasure in an equitable fashion, right? In most cases, most freely readily available porn centers the penis and the pleasure of the penis. It doesn't really show the equitable pleasure that is God designed. Right? You know what I mean? So it really does, what you're looking for, you'll never find in the fantasy that is porn.
Right. I think that kind of answers the two parts of that question. The second question was a little bit on the negative impact of porn on marriage and sexual relations. I think you kind of touched on it there in what you said. But I definitely think that obviously porn is a production, right? It's an edited version. It's basically the equivalent of a filtered picture on Instagram, right? It's not realistic. It's not real. People have like smooth, poreless skin, big eyes, fuller lips, slimmer faces,
lashes,
right? And it's just not what they really even look like. And so that's what I would say that's how I would explain it anyways. The equivalent of what porn is. It's just not a realistic standard for anybody to be able to meet naturally.
And and the danger, if we even look at filters, for example, that's a really good example. Some people, if too connected or too committed to that idea, then when they look in the mirror, they're dissatisfied.
Right.
Because I don't look like this filter, right? I'm ashamed. I'm afraid now. Granted, like we've all, like, I'm not gonna say we all done, but many of us done it. There's times like I'll hop on live and I'm looking like what I've been through. So I might throw a quick filter on to go, on a live or whatever, just because, but it's not something that I need to have. So when it becomes a compulsion, like I can't, and it controls you, then that's the problem. Because then what you're also doing with the filters in particular is you are presenting a false narrative. What you're saying, like if all of your social media is full of filtered
pictures,
then when it's time to step out into the world and meet a real person in real life, when Snapchat is not around, then there's like a bait and switch type of situation.
Right.
And that's not fair to yourself or to other, and forget the other people. That's not fair to yourself. Like
you're adding pressure.
Yeah. And so when we look at that same idea with relates to porn, it's not fair for yourself or to your partner, because particularly in marriage, like you don't have a fluffer offset. And for those watching who don't know what a fluffer is, a person hired specifically to keep the actors aroused. So so they'll step off set and whatever they do, and then come back on ready. So they're filming for 14, 16 hours. Like, and erections in typical cases don't last, that long. So you don't have a fluffer there. You don't have an endless, energy or whatever. There's no cut. You know what I mean? There's no, there's like, you have bills, right? You had an argument a couple weeks ago that you're still mad about. Them dishes are still in the sink. So like you're setting you're setting yourself up to be perpetually dissatisfied.
Yeah. That's a great answer. And Pastor Hopkins says, good answer and thanks. So I hope we answered your questions. I actually did an inbox. And it says, I am a virgin, but I have masturbated. Does that mean that I'm not a virgin anymore?
So, this idea, it really is just, so I guess if I was in coaching, I would throw back to them, what would it mean for you if I said, no, you weren't? And would process what that feeling was. Because a lot of times, folks will ask me, and this is not particular to the person who asked this question, if you're listening, but folks will ask those questions like, am I still a virgin? Is this okay? Can I do this? Am I allowed to do that? And my answer is almost like it's like a gatekeeper between them and guilt. Right. And so that's not the role that I serve. Like I am, an educator. And so, and even in my day-to-day life, I don't even use the word virgin. I use sexual initiation. Like they've never had sex with it, because the thing with virgin comes this idea of the purity and like a very narrowed idea of purity. It doesn't really take into the heart posture that abstinence really is. But if we're looking at Webster's definition, that's a virgin is someone who has not had sex, and masturbation is not sex, then sure. But in the overall context, what I believe is underneath that question, I would dig in a little bit more to see like, what does that mean for you? To not be a virgin, but in the overall sense of the word, because masturbation is not sex for me. Not to say that it's a approval to do it, but it's not sex. So if we're looking at Webster that says a virgin is someone who has not had penetrated sex, then yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. Let me see. Did you get any inboxes?
Yeah.
Nope. We have any questions? We're getting ready to wrap up right now, so please send in your questions. I'll give you 1 minute, and then we're going to close if I don't get any more questions. Let me see. No, nothing. Oh, there it is. Okay. you have to go to the inbox where, inboxes go to die, the ones that you don't see because they're not friends with you sometimes.
Let me try that.
Yeah. If they're not following you, yeah. So yes. So while we are waiting for your questions to come in, just make sure to like, share, tag somebody in the comments that will benefit from this conversation. Ms. Brittany has given us so much information, such great points on sex and especially from a singles point of view and also from a marriage point of view. Be sure to share this. Like it. You can catch it on the replay here, or you can catch it on my brand new YouTube channel. Lifeboat. Yeah, thank you. The Lifeboat with Absolutely Arian. If you do have any more questions, I don't know, Brittany, are you open to answering any questions if they do come in your inbox?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, to a certain, after a while, after a couple questions, I'm gonna tell you a book a session.
Right.
Quick, I can help
out. Okay, cool. So yeah, so obviously, there's a fee now. If you do want to have any more questions here, but if there are no more questions, we're gonna go ahead and sign out. Thank you so much for this very educational session. I've enjoyed it. I mean, I think it's so important, and I just commend you even for having the boldness to do this, especially as a Christian woman, because it can be seen as such a taboo, subject, and people are very kind of easy to talk about it. Yes. And so I'm so happy that you said yes. When I asked you, I just felt so, so pushed to ask you to do this, because it's something that I love to tackle, these kind of conversations that people are just not willing to talk about. Because when I did finally come to the church, what I found that I lacked within my community or the people who I was around was transparency. Mm-hmm. And when I had questions, people gave me very cookie cutter answers that weren't realistic, And so this is why I created the Lifeboat, because I believe that it's really founded on, that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And the word of our testimony is transparency. And transparency, we've overcome by being transparent, because that means that we've come to a place of healing, but we also overcome by transparency because we also give other people the opportunity to see what we've been through and how we've overcome.
Yep.
And so this is literally the foundation of the Lifeboat. And so I thank you so much, Brittany, for coming on here. I think you've gotten very needed conversation. We'll definitely have her in Montreal. Well, there you go.
Absolutely.
So actually, while we're here, thank you for this platform and information. You're so welcome, Kimberlyn. Make sure you share this video now. Okay, so Brittany, why don't you drop your information? How can people reach you if they want to book you for a session for their churches, for their singles ministries, for their couples ministries? How can they reach you?
Absolutely. So if you just on my day-to-day shenanigans, you want to stay in touch with me, it's at The Intimacy Firm on Instagram and on Facebook. My website, theintimacyfirm.com, has the book Brittany or Work With Me. I think it's at the top. You'll see it. So at the top, that link you can submit a speaking request. Also you can gain access to my speaker sheet. They have a list of the workshops that I have available. I also have my signature workshop during discussions. It's customized to fit whatever the need of the group is, from 8 to 80, anything under the umbrella of sex, intimacy, and relationships. If you want to email me, admin@theintimacyfirm.com is my email address. For the Lifeboat fans, if you inbox me for the rest of the night, it may take me a while to get it because I got homework to do after this. I'm in seminary right now.
You're soon gonna be Dr. Brittany.
Come on, glory. Come on, Jesus, do it. So,
right.
But if you inbox me tonight, I'll try to get to your questions as soon as I can. And like I said, you always can book a one-on-one session with me. I still have a few spots left for this cycle of coaching, and this was really good. I felt like I don't know what's on this Lifeboat. I don't know what's on it, because normally I'm like, but this was good. This
Oh,
was
thank
good.
you. I enjoyed you too. I mean, I'm just like, I'm so glad that you said yes. You don't even know how much it means to me. I just really, my whole purpose really is to help people overcome.
Yeah.
And so you really contributed to this conversation, and I know a lot of people are going to be, who hasn't watched this yet, they're going to be blessed, and the people who have already watched it, the comments tell it all on its own. People are really, really blessed by this session. So thank you so much, Brittany. You were a blessing. I'm going to bring you backstage. I'll meet you there in a second.
Okay.
And I'm just going to go ahead and sign out for the night, okay?
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much. And make sure you guys follow Brittany, send up some hearts, some likes, some clapping of the hands to thank her so much for this session tonight. She was awesome. And throw her some love, let her know how much you appreciate her. Okay, so I'll see you soon, Brittany. So thank you so much for watching and joining us tonight on the Lifeboat with Absolutely Arian. I really enjoyed this conversation tonight. And if you have, make sure you also share, like, and subscribe to my new YouTube channel, The Lifeboat with Absolutely Arian, so that you can have updates on these, notifications, on these lives. We go live every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we have conversations that are typically taboo or things that we don't necessarily talk about in traditional ministry. We tackle those topics here on the Lifeboat so that we can educate ourselves and also be more open and transparent when it comes to how we live as Christians. We don't have to be in this box that people want to box us into. No, we are more than that. God is 3D. God is three-dimensional. He is multi-dimensional. He's multifaceted, sorry. And because we've been made in his image, so are we. And so we have to be able to tap into different parts of who we are through different types of ministry. And so thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to be back here on Thursday night with us. Thank you, bless you, and keep on sailing on.